No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this Thoughtful Thursday, I want to go over something. We've been talking about some dysfunctional team elements and the things that would lead to a team being dysfunctional versus high performing starting on Monday. And we had some people reach out to us on Instagram and LinkedIn on a specific element that they wanted to hear more about. And I thought it's something that we touched on, and I didn't think it was going to be something that people wanted to hear more about, but our listeners speak. Something I specifically said around one of the things that could lead to a team lacking trust is that when team members don't have their strengths leveraged, but in actuality, you're really more putting people doing things in line with their interests. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to strike a chord with some people who are working on teams where it might seem that their coworkers are being put in roles or doing things that they want to do more so than in roles and in spaces where they are good at doing something. And this is a tough one because, I'm a big believer in putting people, increasing the number of hours people have every week that have them doing things they enjoy doing. But sometimes the things that we enjoy doing and the things that we are good at doing, they don't always line up. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a tough one because in the perfect world and how we look at things is like not only are you like enjoying the thing that you're doing, but you're also really good at it.
Right.
But if that's the case, right? Like then it's kind of like you should have that as like your life's body of work, whatever that thing is.
Right.
I think in a lot of instances, what ends up happening, and I've seen this myself as well, is that you have somebody who is like, I am really focused. I am really productive when I get to do this thing because this is actually all I want to do. And again, it's not that it's a natural strength. It's just that they really enjoy doing it, so they put much more effort into it. Which then, from a leadership standpoint, you're like, well, like why would I move them, or why would I add something different to their plate? Or I know that part of their job is like do this other thing. But I'm just going to have them focus on that because like that just makes my life easier, and so I think that kind of that lens of looking at things, I think when we're talking about building trust through a team, that is where it can start to break down a little bit, is if you start to see or feel the sense of like, well, it's because you don't want to have like a healthy amount of dialogue with this person about it. It's because you're not having the same standard across the board. Just because somebody has an interest in that, it doesn't mean they should just be able to do it. And then vice versa, though. Sometimes there's people that have a strength to something. They're naturally really, really good at it, and they actually don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to have the same kind of conversation in the other side of things to be like, no, but I understand, but it's also a part of your job. So like it's one of those situations where I think we mix up the idea of strength and interest, and we say that somebody's interested in something and it's a strength of theirs. Versus truly taking an assessment of what the strengths naturally are, and then having conversation with everyone involved around how do we align best what works well for our team, bringing them into that dialogue and conversation, but then making sure that you have consistency across the expectations of the job.
I have found that in a lot of instances, when a person is really interested in something, they enjoy doing it, and they're not good at it, that in a lot of cases, they don't have a accurate understanding of what that thing is, meaning they're interested in it because they believe it to be something different than it actually is. You have people out there who say, I love coaching people. I love, giving people feedback on what they're doing. Okay, let's see how you do that. Well, if they're not doing it very well, then and then you tell them what the right way is to do that, what that entails, to be able to give feedback to somebody, to be able to coach them on doing something, and the reaction is, I don't want to do that. Well, that doesn't mean that they are interested in doing something and they're not good at it. It means they're not actually interested in doing that thing. They think it's something different than what it actually is. And a lot of times people will, I don't want to say lie to themselves. They just have an inaccurate understanding of what it is. They think it's something different than what it is. So as a leader, oftentimes you can kind of, get people more in line with the things they like doing and the things that they are good at doing by having these kind of clarity sessions, kind of figuring out why people want to do something if they're not good at it, and making sure they are very clear on what that thing is. Because if you want to leverage somebody's strengths, nothing feels better than having a strength of yours leveraged to do something that you enjoy doing. And by allowing people to do things poorly simply because they enjoy doing it, you're not benefiting them, because one, they're not building up their resume. They're not actually doing the thing that will help their career. And two, you're absolutely hurting the trust of your team, which says you as a leader put a stronger or a higher value on people doing what they want to do versus what actually has to get done in order to get the results you want to get done. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is, have you ever had a conversation with an employee around this exact thing, around making sure that they, understood what something really was, and then getting a kind of a response from them that led you to believe that, maybe they weren't quite as interested in doing that thing as they thought they were interested in doing it. And so I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it up toward one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, have you ever had an employee say they really wanted to do something and you let them do it and it wasn't getting done the correct way, and you had to kind of level set with what that thing actually was, and then they kind of maybe backtracked a little bit and said, okay, this might not be for me?
Yes, multiple times. I think two times stick out to me specifically. I think in the development space, it's typically when you have somebody who is a high-performing individual contributor that has a lot of thoughts and opinions around everyone else around them and their ability to perform, and then providing them with an opportunity to lead, in a kind of maybe a formal way or some type of an assignment that's temporary, but say like, okay, cool. So like now what I'm going to have you do is step back and lead the team and be responsible for the greater productivity of everyone. And because you're a great individual contributor, do a great job, you should be able to teach them how to do it. And then what you find out a lot of times is like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that was actually the responsibility. I didn't realize how many people have so many questions about different things. I didn't realize that when you ask people to do something a certain way, they tend to do it the way that they want to. And so you kind of have these aha moments where it's like, okay, like the leadership element and the ability to lead a team is very different than being the person who's doing the work to produce a certain outcome. I think so. That's the first thing. The second one is also kind of being in retail my entire career, is you always kind of have this element of like the kind of the merchandising visual kind of responsibility, stocking of inventory responsibilities that are a part of retail stores. And sometimes there's this maybe lack of understanding that like when you work in an industry like retail, like everybody should be able to and should always focus on helping customers. And sometimes the tasks that you have or the role that you have is one that requires a good amount of focus around certain tasks. But those tasks are never to supersede taking care of a customer one way or another when you can. And of course, you have resources, you have peers, you can point to them. But I think sometimes people go into those roles with this idea of like, well, I'm just going to like be so much more productive and so much more efficient. And like, we're just going to be responsible for what we're responsible for, which is this thing, this pricing, this merchandising, this downstocking, this fronting of product, whatever you want to call it, these tasks. And then they get a role like that, and then you sprinkle in the fact that you still have to, help customers that have questions and be involved with your peers around teaching them what you're doing and what you're learning. And sometimes that becomes a thing where it's like, well, that's a very different job or different level of responsibility than I thought it was initially. I only saw it in this very kind of small lens of the responsibility of the thing that I really wanted to do. And it's like, right. Well, that's a part of it, but the job is much bigger than that.
Right. I think that can be a pretty common occurrence in the retail and service industry, where people don't actually want to be in the retail or service industry, and they find this kind of like little tiny element of the job that they like doing that has nothing to do with why the organization exists to begin with, which is because there are customers who want to talk to you or clients who want to talk to you, and it is a retail or a service oriented job. Every job in a retail or industry job is a customer service job. Every single one of them that is customer facing, of course, every one. And so if you have employees who don't want to do that, that's kind of a cost of admission. And if you can have people who are good at other things too, and you can put them in spaces where they can do more of those things. But at some point in time, there will be a time or multiple times where everybody has to come together and do why the business exists to begin with, which is to help customers. And if you have people who don't like doing that, it's a disservice to your team and to the building of trust of the team to kind of allow those people to kind of hang on those little elements they like doing and to not do well at that core thing. The core thing is the cake. The other thing is the icing. And so if you're a leader and you're finding people who are good at these other things, be very careful about this. Be careful that you're not giving them an out or looking for a way to keep them away from the core part of your business because they're not very good at it, by filling their day with these other things, because eventually those other things will run out. And it will be glaringly obvious that they are not good at the whole reason their job exists to begin with. So definitely a reason that a lot of teams lack trust is when leaders kind of find these different spaces for people to play that have nothing to do with why they're supposed to be there.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.